Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Radio Free Urbanism, the podcast about urbanism and stuff. That's right. Glad for everybody to be joining us here today. I'm one of your hosts, Ethan, and I don't think I can hear my co-host here, Sully.
Now you
Sully
can.
is also here.
Now
Sully,
you can.
introduce yourself to the people.
Not just myself, but I come with a partner now. Look at this. I've never owned any fancy audio technical equipment that's not in my wheelhouse, but thanks to our Patreon members who give us how much, Ethan?
$1 a month at
$1.
starting rate.
$1 a month.
More generous patrons.
And plus the more generous patrons, I was able to purchase this beautiful microphone through which you are listening to me now, which is, I hope, a lot higher quality than previous episodes. So as you can see, we don't take your Patreon money lightly. We don't gamble it away or spend it on fancy steak dinners. We're here to improve.
We should be doing that, but we're generous. We're very generous with you people.
Yeah. So I don't know how to use this thing. I hope it doesn't go away. You know, I just literally took it out of the box and plugged it in.
Yeah, so we're still working out some audio things on Sully's end, but it's great to have him here. Unfortunately, we are missing Nick today. He has some important things to take care of. But we do have quite a show for you today, starting out with one of our first stories here. This coming to us from my home city of Portland, Oregon, and it has to do with transit funding. This has been kind of a recurring issue a lot recently with a lot of cities, and for me, it's finally starting to come to my neck of the woods. So, in a recent state legislative session, the state Senate failed to pass any sort of new transportation funding for the entire state of Oregon. And so what that means is that since there's no improved or changed funding, they're still resorting to the old funding methods. However, these old funding methods are kind of out of date, and agencies, transit agencies, specifically TriMet, which provides service to the main port area around Portland, Oregon, is starting to deal with some issues of lost funding. So it's not so much like Pennsylvania, where it's going to be an immediate drop-off in funds, but it is more so a death of 1,000 cuts, where there's still some funding, but service is going to have to get cut in some sort of way. And this could happen as soon as November 2025. Now, some of the first cuts that will be happening to the system, according to TriMet, would be on bus services, but it would eventually make its way over to the light rail system, including MAX, where it would see cuts to the Green Line and other lines as well with frequent service. Now, the governor of the state of Oregon, Tina Kotek, has called for an emergency state session to try and figure this funding bill out. A lot of this does come down to a lot of other counties around the state not wanting to raise taxes on any sort of other areas, one of them being the payroll tax. We in the state of Oregon don't have any sort of tax on the on sales here, but we do have a tax that is paid through paychecks coming in, essentially meaning that every paycheck you have, a little bit goes out to transit and transportation funding. Now, TriMet and the city of Portland has asked for that to be raised. Same with other cities across the state, including Salem and Eugene. However, this has been one of the main points of contention, as well as road tolling has been a main point of contention, and registration fees for vehicles going up has been another main point of contention. So it's been a lot of gridlock here, and it's starting to seep into actual life. And disappointingly, a lot of people are going to figure out about this transit budget shortfall.
When you say transit budget, are you saying, you said transportation budget originally, so is this only affecting transit, or does it affect roadways as well?
No, this affects roads as well, too. ODOT recently had to lay off, I think, about 300 people. There's currently a pause on a highway widening project in Portland, which has been one of the few shining examples of an actually good thing going on during the midst of this. But yeah, many of the road agencies are getting funding reductions. PBOT is one of them as well, too. They're one of the main things as well that is getting cut is the pothole response team, which is essentially a number that you call for a pothole hotline, and they come and patch up your pothole in your neighborhood. That is going to be severely diminished in their capacity.
Well, make those calls now.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
So maybe, just maybe, people will care then. Because, I mean, the rural counties are also being affected is really what I was getting at. It's not just people who live near a bus or a train line. Okay.
We also do have rural transit services out here that will most likely start to feel the effects as well, since they are, incredibly subsidized compared to urbanized ones.
Hmm. What do you think are, because I'm not from Oregon. I'm sure most of our listeners aren't. So what are the politics in the Oregon State Assembly and Legislature that have led to this? What are the main objections or what's going on there?
Yeah, so one of the biggest objections to this whole funding bill has actually been from some misinformation that's been going around. There is a state senator that represents one of the Portland exurb areas, and his name is Mark Meek, and he was screaming about how this House Bill 2025 is what it's called, would add road tolling back onto highways out here, which to any East Coaster sounds like a completely normal thing to have in your state, but on the West Coast, if you have a toll, that's basically like killing your firstborn child. Um,
Except in Orange County.
that is true. In Orange County, they do have tolls, but on the East Coast, tolls are normal. You come out here, yeah, it's political suicide to try and get a toll put in here anywhere.
Right.
But essentially, this politician thought he saw some verbiage about tolls being implemented with this new House bill when they weren't. They weren't going to be implemented with this House bill. He was fact-checked to death on this one and still stood his ground there as well, too. So the state does have a supermajority with Democrats, and most of them did want to fund this. Even a few Republicans did, too, but they needed, I believe it was, I can't remember if it was 67% of the vote to get this funded. I'm not too certain on the exact number, but they were just a couple of seats short from getting this actually passed through.
So is there a second chance? Are they going to rework the wording, or is it kind of done for now?
Yeah, so there was a second chance that happened. This is kind of basically like a final going through this special session right now that's been called by the governor, because there was an original House Bill 2025, then there was a second House bill, I think it was called 3548, and now there's this special session that's supposed to try and amend the bill to be able to get through and actually provide funding for roads and transit within the state. One of the biggest contention points being the highway widening project, the Rose Quarter Transit Project, or the Rose Quarter Freeway.
When you say point of contention, you mean some people don't want it to happen?
Yes, some people don't want it to happen. There's been quite a few different points of contention, from increased taxes to or increased tax rates to things like highway mega projects as well.
Yeah, well, if they want a lower budget, that highway widening would be one of the best things to cut. And to those of you who may be uninitiated or stumbled across this podcast and wonder why I say that, all I would like to point you to is the 405 widening, a freeway I'm quite familiar with. I've spent my whole life near in Los Angeles. I believe it was a $2 billion? Yeah, it was a $2 billion project to widen the 405 between the San Fernando Valley and the West Side. And within 2 years, travel times went back to what they were before the widening, and after that 2-year mark, the travel times continued to rise. And so highway widenings rarely, if ever, I would love to see an example where they alleviated traffic for a sustained period of time. And that's because usually the latent demand on any highway is not 1 or 2 lanes worth. It would take adding 30 lanes to actually meet the demand of every single person who wants to use that highway at rush hour. So it's a terrible waste of money. It doesn't really get you anywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it doesn't get you anywhere. And crazy enough with this one project as well, it's essentially trying to fix a bottleneck right near downtown with the highways. And there's also kind of a freeway cap portion that was proposed with it as well, but it also included lane widening at the same time. And the cost for this project has inflated. And on top of that, some of the federal funding for it was revoked by the Trump administration too. So it's kind of really just a lot of blows hitting this highway project that anybody who actually wants this to go through is kind of, slowly losing their opportunity to actually have it happen. And I don't think it should happen at all, if anything, at least not with any lane widening.
So are there people who are in the local legislature who are saying let's cut this highway widening thing? Or
yes,
are there
are people.
Okay, because I imagine there's other people too who say this has to stay or I'm not voting for it.
Yes, there are people on both sides of that. Yes. So it's
boy.
Really kind of honestly, I don't know if we're going to get that funding in time for November 2025. Hopefully we do, but it's going to be a lot of work in the legislative sessions in Salem to actually get this through and get the funding that we need for our public transportation, because my God, we cannot afford to cut transit at this juncture. This is
Yeah.
such an important time for public transit right now. And states have to step up, because at this point, the federal government is not someone you can really look at right now for any sort of funding along those lines. You know that very well in LA, Sully.
Oh yeah, and I'm surprised that the feds aren't going to step in and fund the roadway portion of it, though. That would be,
Yeah.
politically consistent for them. But maybe
Well, we don't have the birth rates that they're looking for. So
I was going to say, yeah, you don't have the birth rates, and too bad it's not based on rainfall. Then you'd get all the funding.
we actually wouldn't. It would still be the South that gets all of that.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah,
well,
we don't get as much rainfall as you think we do here. We get just about as much as it honestly is like the Midwest here. It's just it all mists down at different times of the year.
Too much for me to
stuff portion is about precipitation. I'll just pull up a little chart.
Okay.
We'll wait on that for the stuff.
That's for the Discord members, the Patreon members. They get to see the chart of the rainfall.
That is true. They get to see the chart for how much, Sully?
$1.
$1 a month. Crazy deal there. But yeah, I mean, like, it's crazy that we have to relitigate this funding for transit every few years. I think one of the biggest side effects of this is that we just can't focus on long-term projects for our cities, because we're constantly relitigating how we're going to fund our systems over and over and over again, that there's no consistent route of, are we going to actually fund long-term solutions to, transit within our cities, or, road maintenance? Or are we just going to keep starting and stopping every 5 years because we have some sort of threat that's coming to our funding? I mean, imagine if this hit other departments. Like, imagine if the fire department had to relitigate this every 5 years.
Yeah. And usually that's why I was so surprised when you said highways were included, because in most places, those are very separate. And you've talked about this before. Getting transit funding is so much harder than getting highway funding.
It's ridiculous to try and get that. Yeah,
so I'm actually I found that very interesting that they're tied together over in Oregon. That seems pretty unique to me.
It is pretty unique. It's just because a lot of our state, Department of Transportation deals a lot with transit building here. I mean, most of the transit projects that were built in the state of Oregon were essentially built as traffic mitigation solutions initially. Okay. So they kind of have that framework around them. So realistically, when it comes down to it, who's going to be deciding that? It's going to be the Departments of Transportation and the Bureaus of Transportation here. TriMet is a little bit different in terms of its creation, but yeah, it was essentially made by the state as a way to reduce traffic in the Portland metro area.
And that's what it does. That's what actually reduces traffic.
It does.
But I think it's a values thing too, like big picture, right? Like the fact that transit is the thing that has to get relitigated versus the fire department, like you said, and versus freeways. It's so interesting. I think people locally, I think we've mentioned this before, but they're always like, I see that bus going by and I don't see many people in it. Why do I fund that? And I'm like, you live on a cul-de-sac that maybe sees 12 car trips a day. Why do we have to pay to pave it? It's the same thing. Like if you're going to go
because I have to use it, Sully. I need to use my cul-de-sac to look around every single day. It is my God-given right to drive everywhere. I need to drive everywhere. This is what has to happen. And if you restrict my movement in any way, I will run you over.
I almost got run over right before this podcast. So the guy was speeding through a red light. Well, okay, but why can't you go everywhere you want on gravel? What's wrong with some gravel?
Because if I don't have 8 lanes of paved wonder right in front of me, paved ribbons across America, I will in fact call it communism.
Wow, I think the reason it can't be gravel on the cul-de-sacs is because that's where the kids play fake hockey in Southern California. They use the cul-de-sac for hockey, and if it was gravel, how would they hit that ball around? That's why we have to pave the roads. That's the real reason. But
Sully, the professional NIMBY.
Oh yeah. I could go right into it. If by the way, if anyone ever needs a NIMBY, an actor, maybe I do bar mitzvahs, birthday parties. I'll come. I'll be the NIMBY. I'm happy to be there. I'll dress up. I'll dress the part too. I have a couple characters I could do. Old lady NIMBY, I could do that. If you want to see something a little bit more out of left field. Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks. Sully will be the first person in drag on Radio Free Urbanism.
Specifically to be a NIMBY. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Speaking of which, Do you know what I was going to say this earlier. The secret weapon they have now is because of the 405 widening, which just completely blew the whole thing wide open with freeway widenings in SoCal. This is great. The live comments. The new thing that they're doing, Ethan. Do you know they're still widening freeways, but you know their new excuse? Have you heard it?
It's reducing idling, right? Or is that one
No.
been around too long?
HOV lanes. Okay.
Oh.
The 405 debacle happened for everybody to see, and it was 2 regular lanes. And then in Santa Barbara County, right through my neighborhood, right after that, they decided to widen the freeway. But right before they finished the grant application, they changed it so that the 2 new lanes, the one on each side, are HOV, high occupancy vehicles. So you have to have more than one person in the car to use them. The fine print, though, because the first section of it opened and I was driving there, and I noticed that the HOV is only from 7 to 9 a.m. and from 4 to 7 p.m. or 6 p.m.
Oh.
So the whole, in every public meeting, no, this is not a freeway widening, this is an HOV thing, and it benefits transit riders because a number of bus routes go on the freeway and they're going to use it. I was like, actually, it's a couple hours a day, maybe 4 or 5 hours a day. And also, the reason that they're able to get away with this is because I've looked into it and there aren't really studies yet, that, as far as I can tell, maybe I'm wrong, that show that HOV lanes have much as a poor return on investment as regular lane widenings. And I think it's because that hasn't been done so much yet. But I have seen research and also just common sense and traffic modeling that I've seen, which is that where even if the HOV lanes alleviate traffic and reward people carpooling or taking transit, wherever those HOV lanes end becomes the new bottleneck. And in the case, the Santa Barbara widening, you're going to have HOV lanes for, I believe, 8 to 10 miles. And then right as you get towards the city of Santa Barbara itself, the HOV requirements end and the freeway will just continue as 3 lanes on each side. So that's going to be where you have a huge bottleneck anyway. And then what are they going to do? Widen it to 4 lanes with an HOV lane?
True. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we need to do that. This will alleviate traffic. Trust me. HOV lanes are totally different. They're managed lanes, Sully. They're totally different.
Do you know what the compliance rate is in LA County for HOV lanes? I saw that recently.
I guess it's under 5%.
Oh, it's miserable. Anywhere that because they have very good compliance on the toll roads because there's cameras, but on the plain old HOV lanes, there's no cameras. There's no enforcement unless you're pulled over by a cop, and the cops are really looking for people speeding, which are putting people's lives at risk way more than Larry David with his mannequin. If anyone has saw that episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, where he uses the HOV lane by putting a mannequin in the car, and then when he gets caught doing that, he hires a prostitute instead just to sit in his passenger seat. But anyway, yeah, no one is really being pulled over for that. So I don't know. I every day when I would go to school for 4 years, I sat in a school bus on that freeway in traffic. There was a legendary day, by the way. Usually it would take 25 minutes without traffic to get home. So it would take 40 with the rush hour traffic. There was one time I was on that bus for 3.5 hours.
Oh my God.
Which was legendary. We almost had a riot in that bus. And we were we pulled off the freeway. We were going all over the place. I will never forget that. But anyway, I don't think these HOV lanes are going to help. But they are going to be on the section of freeway I used to sit on as a kid.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, it's crazy just how little and how ineffective just highway widening is in general. And I mean, I'm really hoping that the Rose Quarter Freeway project just doesn't go through, bringing it back to our topic here. But we do need that funding because the cuts are looking pretty severe. I mean, once we get into it, we're going to start cutting whole bus routes. First, it's going to be in the suburbs, okay? And not the most horrible place to be cutting bus routes out, the more exurban routes. But once we start getting into the actual city, and once we start getting to the light rail, then people who really rely on transit are really going to be impacted by it. Not saying that there aren't people in the suburbs who rely on transit. They're going to be massively impacted. But when you cut a, light rail line from running all the way from downtown to the southeastern suburbs of Clackamas to just running between Clackamas and Gateway and making people do a transfer onto one of the 2 lines that goes to Gateway that isn't the green line, then you're going to have some really, really major severe consequences, increasing travel times on transit, moving people to cars and making traffic that much worse for anybody else who has to drive.
Traffic worse, and by the way, the roads will get worn down faster. Like there's a measurable. Yeah. I bet there's even if there was a longitudinal study on this, I bet there would even be a measurable health effect. Thanks
100%.
to more particulate matter emissions. Like the amount of, and also I'm thinking of all the people who chose to live where they did because of transit. I know many people like that. I'm someone like that. I chose to live in this neighborhood in LA because I could go 7-minute bike ride to the Wilshire Western D-Line station. And since it's been out of service for the past month, it has like vastly changed my life. I'm now biking all the way to work, which luckily takes actually only a few minutes longer or around the same amount of time, although it's far more dangerous because I'm like biking on LA streets. But yeah, for people who are even further out, and I talked to a guy who I won't name, but he used to work at LA Metro. And now he lives in Orange County, and I was talking to him, and he didn't know about the D-Line closure, and he's like, that is such a classic LA Metro move. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, between me and you, a lot of the people who work there don't ride transit regularly, don't ride to work. So they looked at a map, and they said, oh, there's another transit stop 2 miles away. No biggie. We'll just close the line for a month while we test trains. And he's like, that's just kind of the attitude they have, but those 2 miles are, there's a lot of people who don't have bikes. That's not a walk. That extra length, that extra distance is not a walk that a lot of people can do.
Yeah.
Or on my bike, those are 2 miles of like arterial roads, people almost hitting me. It's
not the best to be walking or cycling on. And I mean, a bus substitute can only go for so long.
Right, exactly. And there is a bus substitute. I think it's number 855. That's how many bus lines there are. That's what the bus substitute shuttle is, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, back to your point about transit funding. One good thing in LA, I think, and you tell me your opinion on this, but having the sort of that surefire funding coming from like half-cent sales taxes, which is how LA Metro is funding itself, where it's like the next 25 years, every purchase made in LA County has a half-cent sales tax. That money goes into Measure M. First there was Measure R, Measure M, guaranteed funds for Metro projects, which they still do need to apply for grants. And I got hair in my mouth and stuff now and again. But anyway, yeah. I think that's a good thing.
The thing is that the funding is still consistent. It just hasn't gone up, mainly due to issues with the pandemic. And operating costs have gone up pretty significantly in the region too. So it's really kind of those two things going at each other. The funding's been consistent. The problem is that the rate needs to go up because of recent impacts, especially since this is more tied to, inflationary issues. And since the rate hasn't been, adjusted in a long while. Also, there was the gas tax that's been funding this transit as well too, which has been another big thing. But it's been more or less a billion different things that haven't really caught up to inflationary issues and rising costs, kind of all hitting Oregon Transit and road maintenance all at the same time. Yeah. So that's kind of the main issue here with transit and, road funding. Yeah. And also, we have had some pretty ambitious ways on how to counter it. My local representative, I believe it's Mitch Green, proposed having essentially half of all the streets in downtown closed to car traffic. Meaning, well, hey, on
the show. That's going to be your job. Reach out to his office.
I will see what I can do.
Yeah, that would be awesome, dude. I want to hear about why he wants to close all the streets to cars.
Half of them, but
was there backlash? Was there a backlash there to that?
Well, I mean, he hasn't really gone through on doing it, but, I'm sure that there were people who probably weren't too happy. But, he got elected, so, that means that enough people liked him to get him in the office.
Well, what would it take for him? So he's your local state representative or city?
No, he's my local city representative. He's my...
Okay. So he's just one vote of many, so it would take...
He is one vote of many. I have 3 reps in my district, so...
How many people
are
on
4 districts in Portland. So, yeah, so 4 times 3 is 12. Yep.
So he's one of 12. And I guess, so that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So would they need, well, anyway, that's something for another time.
Yeah,
what kind of closed streets or who knows?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know law. But okay. I think you want to move on to our next story?
Yeah, I think we should move on to our next story. Sully, this one comes from you.
Yeah, I came across a headline, as I often do, because that's mostly what I read about. I came across a headline, and guess what the headline said?
What did it say?
If you build bike lanes, people will bike in them. I know.
Holy shit.
Totally mind-blowing.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? The good news is it was a study that was done in New York City. They looked at 72 million city bike rentals, which is the bike share program there. And they looked at the increases, or the change, I should say, that happened to be an increase in bike usage at bike rental stations where protected bike lanes, class 2 bike lanes, and sharrows were put in. And even though this may seem like a super intuitive, obvious thing, I can tell you that there's actually a big gap in the research here. First of all, class 4 lanes are kind of a new thing in America. Like, I think the very first one was done in 2012 in San Jose. So not a lot of time for longitudinal studies to be done, or studies at all.
What about the like protected bike lanes in Davis that had existed since the 60s? Were they classified under that, or?
So no, because those are mostly class 1, where they're like off-road. So like the rated class 4, like all that kind of stuff was a very new. I've actually met the engineer who designed the very first protected intersection in America, and that was in 2014, also in San Jose, which was pretty cool. And that connected to some class 4s, which he told me were some of the earliest in America, but maybe we need to look this up and verify. But regardless, they're not that old as a concept in the US being implemented. And, I was trying to help a nonprofit in LA write a paper to prove to city council members, like, build lanes and they will come. And actually, it's hard to find data on that, particularly with class 4. But this data, I'll read you some of the results. That's the word I was looking for. Okay, so they found that after a protected bike lane goes in, bike trips at nearby stations jump about 18%. So there's an 18% increase just from having one protected bike lane, right? Okay, painted lanes and sharrows, a 14% bump. But the kicker is that with causal analysis, which is more than just correlation in terms of it's an actual effect, they found that only protected bike lanes really matter, and that they lead to an average of 380 more trips per month per station.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is really interesting.
That is significant.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing I liked that they did in this is they looked at the census blocks, and the census tracts, actually, which are the smallest unit that the census gathers data on. And they found that the increases were not the same, just like across New York. The highest increases were in census tracts with higher average ages.
Oh, wow.
The best increases in bike mode share were in census tracts where the ages were between 60 and 79. And the jump in those districts were 700 extra trips per month per station.
Wow, okay.
It's really interesting. And I wish they'd done the same thing for kids. Maybe they did and it wasn't interesting to put in the paper.
That's still a ridiculous jump. I mean, 7xing the amount of biking just because the senior citizens are in the neighborhood. Who told me old people couldn't bike around?
Hey, yes. Oh, another interesting side note that came as a result from the census tracts was they looked at race as well. They found that regardless of race, protected bike lanes increase ridership pretty much the same way, except in census tracts in New York, where with higher percentage of black residents, where there was almost no effect at all, which is interesting. It's hard to know, when you gather data like that, what the reason is for something like that.
I mean, we don't know what's going on with the actual protected bike lanes in those neighborhoods. Maybe they're not up to the same standard. I know that it did say class 4, but even at that level, still bike lanes are still not the same. And, marginalized communities have less bike infrastructure in general.
They also said, so they tried to come up with a few ideas, as you do kind of at the end of a paper in the discussion section.
Yeah.
And they said it might be affordability because, there's a strong correlation between minority communities and wealth, obviously, especially in a city like New York. Access to bikes, safety concerns, or even policing. So they're like, who knows? That would take another study. But the bottom line is, across the board, protected bike lanes are used and they increase biking, which is fantastic.
Who would have thought?
Yes, and I will share my screen with you just so that the people who watch this on YouTube or wherever else, they can see these cool results here. So here it is. Here's a great map, by the way. I love that this map is.
Wow, yeah.
which is a map of New York bike infrastructure. There are far more protected bike lanes than I thought there were.
Well, Manhattan's rich, but I mean, like every other borough is honestly kind of lacking.
Yeah, I mean, considering that neighborhoods like up in here in Brooklyn, once again, I'm pointing out I've never been to New York, but believe me, I know it very, very well. Don't we all, from culture and stuff? But neighborhoods up here like Astoria, Williamsburg, they're like as dense as a place like Amsterdam with similar land use, right? In terms of the number of people who have garages or own cars and stuff like that. So there's no reason that the public space, the streets, can't also emulate the Netherlands. It's also rather flat in these areas too. So yeah, like this is just more reason for the government in New York to build more of these. Like they have their own data basically now. So yeah, you can see here, this is kind of cool. City bike trips have exploded since 2018. And then the important data from the study itself is this little tiny chart here, which is pre and post bike lane install change in trips. So you can see painted in shadows, kind of a meh increase. It looks like it's from maybe 900 to 1,000, but that's within the margin of error. Whereas protected looks like it's from about 1,700 maybe or 1,800 to like 2,500 or.
There is definitely some identifiable growth with the actual protected bike lanes.
Yes. Yeah. And you can see why. Like if you look at the three types, there's really only one of these that older people or people not comfortable biking would really like to use. The painted one actually to me looks scarier than the Shero, because at least with the Shero you can kind of take over the lane. But like this,
yeah, that is a bad painted lane. That is like 2009 era. That is like 2000s bike infrastructure right there, where that is very performative.
Nostalgia, so much nostalgia there.
I have, a lot of nostalgia of almost getting run over in those lanes.
Yeah, we don't have.
Doored. That is, I forgot that is like the Doored zone right there.
That is the Doored zone. So you're saying you don't bike in narrow class 2s anymore? You're so lucky.
I mean, I live in Portland. Narrow class 2s are honestly kind of rare here.
Wow, that's amazing. Class 2s at all are rare in LA, but that's just because we don't have any bike lanes.
Yeah.
I do use a class 2 on 7th Street every day. It's better than
our painted lanes. Honestly, I keep forgetting the classifications, but our painted lanes are definitely wider, and a lot of them have door zones if they're next to parking. Like they'll have like an actual like gap between the parking and the door, like where a door could open up.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because something like that nuance is not captured in this study, for instance. Although generally, I do think that like protected lane better than anything else. Like I don't have a doubt in my mind that that's what data would show. Although the nuance is interesting. So yeah, another interesting map they have here, they have a map of every single bike station. I'm surprised that there aren't more actually in Central Park. You can see the outline of Central Park. I'm also surprised by how many bike rental stations there are that are adjacent to no bike lane at all, because you'd think that if the city was going to invest in bike share, they would also be investing in infrastructure at the same rate or speed, and clearly they're not, right? So there's like...
Well, bike share is private. Yeah. I mean, City Bike is owned by, like, Lyft.
Ah, okay. That's actually interesting. So is it a profit-driven business? I actually have no idea.
I believe it's profit-driven, but subsidized at the same time, if I'm not too mistaken on that one. Like, there is some subsidization with bike share, but it's not entirely subsidized.
So this gives more...
No, it should be. It should be. That's my hot take of the day, is that bike share should be subsidized by the city.
Okay, in the same way that transit is, or road.
Yes.
Road.
I mean, LA's is kind of, isn't it?
It's an LA Metro. Yeah. And
it's a cheap rate, too.
Oh, it's cheap. And so is the one in Santa Barbara is really cheap. And it's privately owned by B-Cycle, which is actually the company that started the very first bike share ever, which is the one in D.C.
Oh, wow.
And in a tiny town of 100,000 people, well, it's not tiny, but, 100,000 people, Santa Barbara, there have been over 1 million miles ridden since late 2021 when they put it in, which is crazy. And would you know it, 500,000 of those miles have been ridden on one single 11-block stretch of one single street. Can you guess which street it is, Ethan?
I'm going to guess it's your one pedestrianized street. I can't remember the name of it right now.
It's State Street, the one street closed to cars.
You should open it up to cars again. Just to really connect the people in the city.
I'm not joking that a lot of people say because there are too many bikes on the street, it's very dangerous for pedestrians. And in order to solve that, we should bring cars back so that the bikes go back into the bike lanes and so that pedestrians know not to walk in the road because
this
they
is true. This is true. We need to bring the apex predator back into the environment.
Yeah, we need to reintroduce the wolves to Yosemite. That's definitely ecology. That's an important thing.
This is true. Yes, this is important. Santa Barbara's State Street lost its apex predator. We need to bring it back to actually cull the populations of bikes who are now overcrowding. And you see, bikes suffer when there's too many of them because they lose their food of pedestrians.
No, because there's too much traffic on bike lanes, so it actually becomes a far less efficient mode of travel. If you get to the point, like Amsterdam is a classic example, you take out the wolf and you create such bad bike congestion that now it's, actually quite terrible for everybody involved.
This is true.
Wow. I love that. That is definitely a terrible analogy. Anyway.
I can't think of worse analogies other than that one.
Yeah, which is actually pretty interesting because usually analogies are so useful, but that one is just horrific. I hope that no NIMBYs have listened to this because I could see it being used. I'll use it. My NIMBY alter ego. What would you guys think of in the Discord? Someone found a video of me ranting and raving like a NIMBY. That would be hilarious. Did you see? Did someone post it in our Discord? I'm trying to remember this week. I saw that a professor. No, this was in the City Beautiful Discord. A professor in Utah wrote a fake paper. So we're going to talk about this next episode because I didn't get to it this week. But they wrote like a comic paper, a parody. That's the word I was looking for. A parody paper like Weird Al, but of the urban planning paper writing variety against traffic calming. And apparently some Utah state senator read it and thought it was real and introduced an anti-traffic calming bill into state Senate. Yeah. So that guy's definitely banging his head against a wall. But I'm going to verify this story, and that'll be our headline for next episode. So stay tuned.
God.
Yeah. Here's the placebo versus actual. Papers are fun. Papers are cool. I love this stuff. And then here's the a black share of the population, which was, how they got that data. And let's see, what else do we have? Oh yeah, here's the interesting stuff, the age stuff. So look at this. So in census blocks where the ages were 60 to 79 was the average age. Or I should say a larger share. I don't want to misstate exactly what it is. Look at this is compared to the overall study, the actual increase. And then look at old people. They like to bike. I also find it interesting to look at where old people live. In New York, they love Central Park. They're all lined up along Central Park.
It's almost like they have money.
It's almost like they got to buy their first house in 1960 when, less than 10% of your income could buy you a house.
And New York was, struggling.
Oh,
Everybody was leaving the city. So
my dad was there. He did not buy real estate. He left with everybody else. But in the 70s. How unfortunate.
The 70s was when it got real bad, apparently.
That's when the Bronx was on fire, which is the neighborhood he grew up in, actually. But yeah, and a lot of old people also live down in, I guess, South Brooklyn. The map is kind of cut off here, so I don't know what this area is called. But and also they live in the Lower East Side. Interesting. But so also, now that I'm looking at this, I'm wondering if there's a correlation not only between older people and biking, but we noticed on the other map that most of the protected infrastructure was on Manhattan. So, and that's where old people live, so that might also help. Which
seems really like it.
Yeah. And you'd think that old people would be the most against bike infrastructure because they often are in other cities. But maybe not.
I mean, maybe they do. Maybe older people do want to be actually active, and in cities like New York, where older people have been active due to higher walkability, you see them being able to ride bikes because they have lower impact on your legs. So getting around by bike is more efficient than walking. So
wow, you mean they don't want to sit inside and stare at a TV?
You'd be shocked. Old people like to go out and do things and have mobility despite their age.
There's nothing more depressing to me than a suburban retirement home where the people and they've built one. When I drive up to Santa Barbara, there's one at the very edge of, I guess it would be like Westlake. Anyways, it's like on the 405, basically in the middle of nowhere. And it's this big, beautiful retirement home building. But it's like it's really like stranding old people on a deserted island. Like you can't go anywhere. It's up this steep hill. It's against a freeway, so there's no like roadway network connecting it to anything.
Oh and, like, God!
Horrible place to be old. Like you can't go. You have to like wait for the retirement home shuttle to bring you around. You know, and I spent a lot of time. I don't know if you know this. I spent a lot of time in retirement homes when I was in high school. Once a week, I would perform piano at all the various retirement homes around town. And I was always, I don't know, actually here's an interesting idea for a study, because I noticed that the ones that were in downtown Santa Barbara, the people seemed a lot more alert and with it than the ones that were like way out in suburbia that were basically strip mall retirement homes. So who knows? But they were all pretty nice because it's Santa Barbara, but I had fans too, you know, every week. It was really nice. That was a fun experience. I gave over 250 performances.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But now I'm trying to figure out how to not share my screen. Oh, I see.
There should be a button that says stop sharing screen.
Stop. There it is. Okay.
Sully has technical issues. Episode 457.
Yeah. Okay. I did not get my major in computer science like everyone else I knew in college. Yeah.
All right. Well, do you have anything else to say on that story, Sully, or are we going to move on to our listener mail?
Let's move on to our listener mail. I will find the parody study. That's what I'll leave off on.
Good to know. We had some really good listener mail this week. We had one really good question, though, that we're going to kind of go a little bit more deep into. It's honestly kind of a two-part question here today. And our first part comes from viewer and patron of the show, Jen Hall. This first question being, what do your parents or other family members think of your podcast? We also do have a second one that's kind of like a second part, very similar, but it comes from another fan of the show and patron, Willie, saying, bouncing off of Jen's question, have you gotten your significant others, family, and or friends into urbanism? Do you annoy them with all of your complaints and observations? I think Sully would be a great one to start off with this.
Oh boy, okay. What do they think of the podcast? They're super proud of it. They think it's awesome. They, you know, my YouTube channel too. My dad worked in media his whole life. That was his career, and so he thinks it's really cool I'm doing that. Not as a career, which he discouraged me from because it's a pretty difficult career to get into and quite heartbreaking. But as a hobby, no, he thinks it's super cool, and they're all very supportive, especially from the perspective of it being a great outlet to have fun, and also a great, it is a resume builder, especially because I'm in urban planning as a career. So if I ever want to put on my resume, hey, I've hosted all these urban planning episodes of a podcast, of urban planning podcast or whatever, that's something that would, and they're my parents, so that's how they think too, right? It's a great career builder, whereas, they're happy I'm not, like what I used to do in high school, which was basically trespassing into construction zones and clambering down creeks and falling into infested stagnant waters under the freeway, which is something that happened to me while I was exploring one time. So yeah,
standard life of living in Southern California.
Yeah, exactly. So they're happy I've moved on from that disease-infested water. Oop, there goes the microphone, to something that is related to my career and could be a career builder, and they're super proud of it. In terms of the urbanism, what can I say? I think I have some of the most supportive parents a guy could ask for. Even when I was expressing interest in it in high school, my mom was helping me research programs. When I was at UCLA and I knew that I wanted to get a master's in urban planning, I really would not have landed where I did at Cal Poly without my mom. She made it her hobby to make a spreadsheet with all the different programs, how much they cost, obviously what we could afford, how far I'd be from home. She helped me do all that. Then she helped me. She was an English teacher. That's what her college degree is in. It's in teaching English, which was super lucky. So she helped me write my essays. And so it was less of she wasn't bringing new urban planning ideas to the table, but in terms of being super enthusiastic and receptive and just as into the stuff as me, that's where she was. And also I think a lot of Americans, my parents have long had an appreciation for beauty in cities, architectural beauty, a love of traveling to Europe. And so it wasn't like I was, saying some radical thing on that front, because way before I was, which I mentioned on a different episode, way before I was into urbanism, we took the very first trip I ever took out of the country. I went to Canada when I was a kid, but the very first trip I really took when I was 13, and we went to Europe, and we went everywhere on high speed rail, and we went to all these different cities. And my parents are city people. I should also say we do not go camping. I've never been camping. We do not go visit national parks. I've never been to a national park with them, but they love cities. They love, walking endlessly. Like when we were in Rome or Florence or Paris, they were up for it, going to museums, discovering interesting things, taking the tube in London. And so it wasn't like some crazy thing for them when I got more into like what actually creates those systems and advocating for cities like that in the United States. And they sort of expect it to over the dinner table, but I don't think, there's some eye rolling, to be fair, but generally very supportive. What about you, Ethan?
Yeah, I would say that my family's pretty supportive on, hearing out about urbanism, urban planning. Kind of grew up in the suburbs, so it's not like they really had an experience of living in the city, either of my parents, but kind of became a little bit more connected to urbanism, at least in within the past few years. It's been kind of something more that I've looked into, especially since a pandemic kind of threw a lot of things around. I got to see a lot of different places, kind of changed my perspective on urban planning, so it was kind of really great to kind of put these puzzle pieces together of someone who was like, hey, I like transit, hey, I like cycling, and kind of be like, hey, American cities really aren't built for that. Why is that? And then kind of doing the math there. And then, going on this journey of talking about it to other people, really using some of, the communication skills that I learned, especially learning how to break down, jargon and other more complicated ideas to audiences that are more general public, because there is a lot of jargon, especially in urban planning. And it's something that I've kind of read about a lot, especially with my more environmental science background. I kind of know a little bit about that, but it's something that I thought was going to be really interesting, and it has been. This urban planning journey has been really great to be on. My parents are both very supportive of the show as well, too. In fact, my mom is one of the patrons who pays us how much? $1 a month.
$1.
So she can watch those shows live. But it's been interesting. My parents have been receptive on a lot of urbanism things, but have also been a little bit critical on some other things as well too.
What's an example? I have an example. I have an example of critical. What's your example of critical?
Yeah, I have an example of critical. One of them was on education and inner city schools being worse than schools out in the suburbs. And if you really come and think down to it, a lot of that comes from the fact that a lot of our wealthier residents who were in cities ended up moving out of the city to our suburban neighborhoods. And since our education programs are based entirely on property taxes for the most part, that's where all the money went. Their higher tax rates pay towards, wealthier residents who pay more in taxes go more towards schools. So it's kind of works like that, where a lot of neighborhoods in cities get divested from their education.
What were they critical of specifically?
Yeah, they were critical of just education being, at least my mom was, she was critical of education being worse in cities.
Oh, she didn't believe that was the case.
No, she believed that education is worse in cities than it is in the suburbs.
Well, but it is.
It is the case, but there's reasons as to why that happens.
Oh, I see. And she's critical of the reasons.
She hasn't really specified the reason. She was just kind of like, cities have worse education. How could anybody live in a city with bad education? Raising like families and stuff.
Yeah,
it is a problem.
I kind of get that, because my parents were huge on education. During we moved to a specific neighborhood that we really couldn't afford and lived in a very small, like badly needs to be remodeled rental house so that they could send me to a great school. Mm-hmm. And I had this bedroom that was the size of the bed it was in. There was no standing room. It was like, after 2008 and things were tough for a little while, but like, so I get that. Like when you're a parent, you're kind of terrified. You send your kid away every day and you don't know what that school is like. Like you can't be there. So and that's probably a conflict because I want to have kids one day. And it'll be a conflict for me too. Like, yes, often, like even in LA especially, I mean, the neighborhoods with the best urbanism have the worst schools, and no one wants to be the first family to go, like knowing that your kid's going to have a bad education, because I care about education too. So, and then the trade off would be a super long bus ride for them, or like a drive. And I knew a guy I've met here in LA whose parents cared so much about good education that they lived where they could afford to in LA, and drove the kid all the way to a private school in Santa Clarita.
Oh my gosh!
A scholarship every day, which is like a good hour from where they live.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like, it is the most important thing, and I think it affects you for the rest of your life. Like, if you go to a really bad elementary school and you can't really read until 3rd or 4th grade, I think that kind of can affect your cognition for the rest of your life. It can affect your spelling, which is something that people put a lot of weight on. So, like...
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they teach that in schools anymore anyways, but,
Yeah. I went to a school that taught cursive, which is kind of crazy. I don't think... Like, I still write in, like, semi-cursive. Okay, yeah, you're one of the first people I've met like that. Okay, interesting.
I was one of the last groups coming out without cursive, so,
Okay.
Yeah, I can read and write cursive. Like, it's just... I don't do it anymore because no one else does.
Yeah. No, to me it's just easy because all the letters are connected. But okay, critical urbanism things. I think my parents are fully on board with the transit, with the architecture, with the bike lanes. Like, they hate fast cars and wide roads because they're ugly to them.
Yeah.
And I love that that's their reason, and that's okay. The thing that's hard for my parents is the housing side of it, where they're not NIMBYs in the sense that they're like, yeah, there should definitely be more housing downtown. But if it's like more ADUs in our neighborhood, doesn't that mean that there's going to be more traffic? Which is the reason that they love traffic calming, or like the reason, like people in my suburban neighborhood all the way back in the 80s petitioned the city to actually close our street off so that it's not a through street. Like, they put in what would now be called a modal filter. And so to them, more housing is sort of the antithesis to that. And I don't blame them, because there is not a promise of increased transit that goes along with that more housing. And so they're not wrong that in my neighborhood it would probably, I mean, actually definitely there would be more cars. Although I do think that bike lanes, e-bikes have totally changed that conversation in the last
100%.
years, which they recognize, because a lot of my neighbors have gotten e-bikes. I've gotten e-bike. But still, so I think that, and there's also that sort of old school, like, and I've had this with my friends' parents too, like the last time that my parents and their friends had to buy a house was like 30 years ago. They bought their house, they got their mortgage, some of them have paid it off. So it's like they don't go on Zillow. They're not like looking at the rents and the home price. And so all they know is like, hey, my house is worth way more. Maybe when I'm old, I'll sell it and give the money to my kids or whatever. So like they're not in that headspace of like, oh my God, I will never be able to afford a house. And so for them, it's not as urgent of an issue.
Yeah.
And I get that, because unless something really personally affects you, like, you're not going to think about it. And even in my case, like, maybe one day my parents will give me the house. I don't know, but I'm just lucky that they bought it when they did. So there's that, where they're like, I don't understand. Like, they'll be like, why can't people just like move to Goleta, or why can't they just build more housing downtown, or whatever it is? And I've argued,
yeah, more housing, just not in my backyard.
Yeah, or they're like, it should be, well, no, because technically downtown's kind of in our backyard. It's only 2 miles away, but like, all the apartment buildings belong down there. That makes way more sense, but what's weird is they're not against like a breakdown of zoning in terms of mixed use, and neither are any of my neighbors. I've asked my neighbors, would you like to be able to walk to a corner store or a coffee shop? And they all say yes.
Oh yeah, no.
So that's not the problem. The problem is
everybody I've talked to.
Yeah.
Light commercial is the most popular thing you could add to any neighborhood ever.
Which is weird, because no one's doing that. We're doing the housing thing kind of first, I guess. I hope first, because I hope this is a ladder of urbanism that we're
I'm really hoping that we can do multiple things at the same time, because, I mean, like, the light commercial would be crazy for neighborhoods to actually get some sort of benefit. But you don't get that without the increased density, too.
Yeah.
So.
To last episode, where I showed everybody those pictures of like the corner store set up on the street, which I just biked past. It's still there, despite being called out on the show, But it's like, yeah, light commercial.
Not that big yet.
So why do you think that the light commercial is such like a? Maybe I think it might be because planners are so under-equipped. Like, they don't want to think about it. Like, adding more housing is already a big enough headache for most planners. I don't know. Maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it would be like not that much work. I mean, if you really think about it, you just change a few lines in some writing. Like, I know that that's oversimplifying the process like a crazy amount, but like, if you really think about it, being like, hey, yeah, these certain uses can be okay in a neighborhood up to this size, and these specific use cases
Right.
could be really beneficial to these neighborhoods. I put a lot of emphasis on it because I mean, if you put the coffee shop or like a corner store, especially in a neighborhood, you're going to eliminate a lot of car trips just
Hmm.
by doing that. And you're not costing the city anything. If anything, you're building a new tax source for the city.
Right.
Like,
I think the question that the planners, because I talk to city planners who are YIMBYs, but who are very frustrated that every year a new California state law comes down affecting zoning and housing, and they have to redo. They're constantly redoing the city zoning code, and so it's very frustrating for them. Whereas with commercial, none of the, at least you could say, okay, an ADU, people have yards, they can build an ADU, but it's like the commercial thing, because there's also parking minimums that they would have to get rid of. But none of the existing buildings, like in that neighborhood in LA or in my neighborhood I grew up in, none of them could easily have commercial in them. Like, it's easy to turn a garage into an ADU, but to turn a garage into a corner store is like a whole other logistical thing, because you have to have ADA access.
it's more like doing the infill development on that one, but
Right. And then it's like, where do you put that infill? Do you put it like in someone's front yard? I just think it's harder for planners to conceptualize, like city planners who actually work
yeah.
for the city. Like, where, like, what's the setback? Because all these suburban neighborhoods have setbacks. So is this thing going to be on the sidewalk? Or what if the front yard isn't big enough? Or like, I think there's a lot more moving parts to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
commercial.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Because the ADUs don't affect the setbacks,
Yeah.
but the commercial would. But yeah, it's really cool to see. Stronghouse had an article about this like 3 years ago, about back before zoning. You can actually go to older neighborhoods and you'll see like front porches that were walled in and turned into stores. And we have those in Santa Barbara. I took a picture for that article of a barbershop that still exists. Literally, someone took their house and just half of their front yard built like a box and put a barbershop in it.
People converted basements here in Portland, like sub basements, into
Yeah,
businesses, and
that's
then
so
live
cool.
above them. Yeah, it's kind of a crazy design choice, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that I think we should start bringing back to a lot of our neighborhoods. Is just having that
Yes.
ability to do that, like commercial, in our neighborhoods.
I believe
And on
Spokane did, by the way.
They did, yes,
Yes.
I believe I saw that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think this would be a good point to start wrapping up the show.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had some great conversations about zoning and transit and
Okay.
bikes and stuff.
And stuff like this
We
mic.
always got to get the stuff in. Yeah, the microphone. What? How did you get that, Sully, again?
Thanks to our amazing Patreon members. So thank you.
Our Patreon
I'm going
members.
to say
Thank you so much.
right up against this mic. Thank you.
And Sully, how could you become a Patreon member?
By contributing $1
At $1? How often?
once a month.
Once a month. Wow. So for just $1 a month, you can become a patron of the show and get to support the show. But not only that, get benefits like early access to the show, getting to join our live chat and ask great questions and comments like Jen, Ren, and I believe who else was in? Yep, just Jen and Ren today. But you also get some other great benefits too, like access to our Discord. So yeah, you get some cool little benefits for signing up and joining
people
our
in the
Patreon.
Discord, they got to read this paper hours ago when I shared it in there. So
That's true. That's true. They also got to ask questions in advance as well too. So
Mhm.
think about that one. Folks, we really want to thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Radio Free Urbanism. Sully, where can the good people find you?
At Sullyville, and anywhere you want to find me on YouTube,
On anywhere.
you want to find me on Blue Sky, you want to go out into the street and yell Sullyville, maybe I'll appear.
Maybe you'll find him on MySpace. Who knows?
Maybe.
But the good people, y'all can find me. I'm Ethan. You can find me over at Climate and Transit on basically any platform that exists. I don't have a MySpace, but that might be coming soon. So thank you so much for watching the show today. And as always, train good, car bad.
2 feet, fantastic.